Welcome to the very first session of this online class. And I will try to post short videos like this one almost daily, because I've been teaching online for now 3 semesters and I start having some ideas on what to do and how to do them so that the class is successful. And the definition of successful for me is mainly enjoyable for everyone. But also successful for me means that we are successful at exchanging and engaging into a rich and sincere dialogue about the concepts that we want to study together. So for me, that's the most important thing to achieve, is to give you elements, concepts, ideas, and engage you in a reflection, a deep reflection on these ideas and concepts. And of course, it's much easier on a face-to-face situation, but that's a challenge I want to take, because that's a technological challenge and it's the challenge of the education in the 21st century. So let's talk first about your assignments. This week you see that there's nothing due at the end of this week, meaning that next Monday you will have nothing to upload. And you will start uploading documents at the end of week number 2. And a good tool for you to navigate through these assignments is to use the syllabus that has been posted on the website, and also the calendar on e-learning. Right now I would like to talk about a paper that I have added to the reading list. I think it's a very important one, and I would like to explain a little bit better why I added that to all of the readings you will have to go through during this semester. So it's a paper by Gilbert Simondon called On Techno-Aesthetics. Very important paper for 2 reasons. Number one is that this paper allows us to identify and to maybe define a work of art as a technological object. And we will see what that means and what are the consequences of such a definition. The first one, which I think is very important, is that definition of the work of art as a technological object generates a new set of functions for the user of the work of art, or the viewer, or the public. And what happens, I think, is very important in terms of temporalities. In the past, with traditional definition of aesthetics, the contemplation of the work of art, meaning the moment where the subjectivity of the viewer is fully engaged, is always bracketed between 2 temporal objects, one that pre-exists the work of art, which is the aesthetic definition of what a work of art should be. It's a set of criteria that pre-exist the experience of the work of art, and that pre-exist the work of art itself. And then there's something that is after the work of art, something a posteriori of the work of art, which is the judgment of the work of art, and that judgment is formed after the contemplation of the work of art. So in that traditional setting, what we see is that the present of the contemplation of the work of art is completely cancelled out or dismissed. with the technological framework, with the work of art as a technological object, what we see is that suddenly the question of the function of the work of art is created, and together with it, the question of the relationship between the viewer and the work of art comes into place. And that text by Gilbert Simondon is a very important one, to an interesting one. I'm not saying that this is the only possible way to introduce technology and to introduce the viewer into the set of reflections and ideas on the work of art in the 21st century. I'm saying it's one of them. So in that paper, and I must say that it's very well translated, so the reading is very fluid. That is not always the case with French philosophy. Gilbert Simondon presents several things. One of them is the concept of what he calls Fanero techniques. So what is that? And I feel that I need to give a little bit more explanation. Fanero means making visible. So Fanero techniques, it's a way to create an object that makes visible and reveals the technological processes by which the object has been made. So for example, the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower doesn't hide anything of the ways by which it has been created, just like the Pompidou Center, the exact same thing of Fanero techniques, which is aesthetic. Okay, so suddenly you see that there's something that bridges the question of function and the question of aesthetics. So techno-aesthetic work for Simondon, it's something that is perfectly functional, successful, and beautiful. And he says that it's technical and aesthetic at the same time. It's aesthetic because it's technical, and it's technical because it's aesthetic. And he says, he calls that an intercategorial fusion. So to me, that's an interesting way of describing a contemporary work of art, and especially an interactive work of art. And then Simondon brings on something else. He says that in the techno-aesthetic object, or in the contemporary work of art, contemplation is not the primary category. He says that there's something really strong that is tactile and something that relates to motor stimulation. There's always in the technological object the suggestion of a movement to engage with the object. And Simondon gives the very simple example of a tool that calls for the action for which it has been made. And he says that suddenly there's something more than the aesthetic pleasure. There's a pleasure of action. There's a dynamic regime of the contemplation that is generated by the beautiful tool. And the body of the operator suddenly gives and receives from the object. And that's very important. So he goes on to say that aesthetics is not only, nor first and foremost, the sensation of the consumer of the work of art. It's also, and more originally so, the set of sensations, more or less rich, of the artists themselves. It's about a certain contact with matter that is being transformed through work. One experiences something aesthetic when one is doing a soldering or driving in a long screw. And I think that's another interesting way of looking at works of art in their relationship to technology. And that way I think that we can avoid the never-ending debate saying, oh, technology has always been involved in the work of art, even painting and the brush and sculpture. It's a technological thing, so the contemporary works of art using computer programs and interactive systems do not present any novelty. Okay, so that's a way to reconsider that debate and to go further. And then once the aspect of the present of the contemplation of the work of art has been redefined by that call for action, suddenly there's a temporal dimension, a new temporality that is made available, which is the present of the work of art. And that's very interesting to think about that, and that's a very good lead into one of the readings of the next week, which is about duration and the concept of duration as defined by Bergson, but I will come back to it. The concept of duration, as explained by Bergson, pertains to the present of a movement. And same thing here, the present of the work of art, it's when we consider a work of art as a movement. And then Simondon takes the example of Mona Lisa, and he says that that work of art has a present, which means that work of art has a present of its seeing, a present of the contemplation, which is not just a static object. He says the smile of the Joconde, that smile is not completely unfolding. It happens in the painting when you are contemplating it. And that constitutes the unfolding in your own and your individual and personal interiority. The smiles that begins and the smiles that ends, so as to return to the face mask of seriousness, are the extreme terms of the temporal thickness of the work of art. The smile will unfold itself, and at the same time it will also already be disappearing. So you see that the present of the work of art is not something that is contained between two limits. It's something that is deep and thick, something in which you dive. Okay, so he says also about the work of art that the central importance of the work of art is the mystery itself of what is not figured. And I think that's about it that I wanted to say and to point out about the work of art. And I hope that this allows for us to start engaging and questioning these new ideas about the new works of art of the 20th and 21st century. Thank you. And